Welcome to Weed Wednesdays, produced by International Broadcast Media, better known as IBM.tv. I'm your host, Jeff Eichen, human rights advocate and social activist fighting for government deregulation of weed and the release of all nonviolent criminals incarcerated for possession of marijuana, moving violations, parking tickets, IRS debt, etc. Here on Weeds Day, we keep the public informed about all things weed related, including festivals and legislation surrounding regulating the growth of hemp. Today, my guests are 3, 2, 1, everybody. That's 3, that's weed, that's 2, that's peace, and that's F Schedule 1. We want no more Schedule 1 for that beautiful plant right there. And nobody should be in jail for a plant. And it's COVID day today. We're going to have our incredible Dr. Robert Young on today. He's going to let you know about what he knows and the inside, the intel, the stuff that that maybe you've never heard before or that you need to hear, and maybe some anecdotes. And since we're in the studio and we're doing our distancing, our social distancing, I'm gonna pull the mask down and love you up, everybody. It's me, Jeff Eichen, and I'm so blessed to have you in my studio and to be here today for Weeds Day, and it's the hemp day or the hump day. So we're halfway through the week. I know every day is Saturday now. Let's get right to it because the hour will go by very fast, and sometimes we go over, but that's our prerogative. And so I want to introduce to you all our beautiful guest and star shiner. This gentleman even has some experience with our project, which is talking about these beautiful people that are, in jail. So we're going to talk to Dr. Robert Young about his passion, his story, and things that you don't know. So get ready, everybody. This is a great show today. And welcome, Dr. Robert Young.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure being here. I probably ought to move away from that backlight, though, so you can.
I can see you right now, but yeah, maybe turn maybe 180 or 40 degrees to the side.
Let's see if this works better. Not better.
I'm the cameraman here. I should be there with you.
I'm taking you to the other room.
Well, seeing Dr. Robert Young and everybody out there, seeing as we're going to be doing this for quite a while now, because we don't know if COVID is going to stay with us or we're going to get something behind it. I'm going to put together my list, my lights, and how we can be super mobile and have a beautiful lighting situation. But you look great now. And how's it going, Dr. Robert? Long time no see. We see each other online, and welcome to my show. This is about reform, about prisoners, and about telling the truth about what we know. Give it a go.
Well, it's a pleasure being here, Jeff, and thank you for the invitation. And I love your connection with hemp and calling Wednesday Weeds Day. So there, there
That's
it
from
is.
Mick Jagger. That's from Mick Jagger.
Yeah, I really think people are just in shock. I've looked at this in so many different angles, from the scientific angle, from the psychological angle, and the word that comes up is fear, and fear has been said to be an acronym that stands for false evidence appearing real. The opposite of that particular acronym would be faith, which I kind of coined, trying to think of the duality that has to exist in life in order for us to learn and to grow and to be tested. But faith stands for first attribute in thinking healthy, and so these are in contrast with each other. We have not a pandemic. Some people have called it a plandemic. Others have called it a fear-demic or a demic. Some have called COVID convid. And so there's this duality that's going on between, what is the truth and, what has been fabricated. And I think the analogy would be is if you take an onion, you just keep peeling it off till you get right to the essence of that onion. I mean, it has layers. And so there's this layer which is called virology, and there's this layer of microbiology, and there's this layer that's associated with, maybe a contributing factor such as electromagnetic frequencies and its effect on the human biofields. And these are things that I've looked at for the last 35 to 40 years. And I've written and published on viruses and vaccines. In fact, I'm going to be presenting at the International Conference of Infectious Diseases that's going to be in June 18th and 19th, in Dubai, but unfortunately we can't fly internationally, so I'll be doing that keynote lecture by Zoom. So, and that works out nice. I don't have to get on a plane. I don't have to go through the hassle. I don't have to do.
It's almost a blessing these days that we can not be globetrotting just to go on stage for 20 minutes. I've been traveling for the last several years, doing my thing, and I'm really kind of thinking that there's a thread here that may assist us to be a little bit more, I think, not organized, but contained, and get the audience even deeper. Because when we go to a seminar, we're just talking to those people in the room.
Yes. Yeah, and to be able to share freely without hopefully not, this information being suppressed, which, some of it has been, to not have to put a footprint into toxicity from flying around in planes and releasing compounds and chemicals that are harmful to the planet. It's just like being here in LA. It's nice to see a blue sky that isn't hazed with factory and emissions and car emissions.
How do we promote that and tell the Greta team, the climate change team, that this is proof?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you know anything about what's happening to the oceans, and if you've studied the effects of acid rain, and if you've seen some of the devastation that's happened in many of our forests, specifically the forests of Denali, and the acid rain that's destroyed, thousands of acres of foliage, what's happening to the barrier reef, and the breakdown of the coral reef there, and the marine life that's being lost because of acid rain. And when I say acid rain, I'm meaning the toxins that are being emitted from from animals, humans, cars, you know, so we're talking about carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, we're talking about methane. And these are the toxins that are absorbed by our oceans in order for the ocean to maintain its delicate biochemistry at a pH of 8.3 to 8.4. Here again, the body uses the ocean uses, just like the body uses, its own skeletal system or its own buffering system to maintain that delicate pH of the balance. So, you know, the thought has been that, well, of course, getting back to the barrier reef, if the oceans drop, let's say from 8.3 to 8.2, that's a 25% increase in acidity, which begins the death of the oceans. And, you know, the oceans become, unless there's some sort of adaptation to the declining pH, all marine life is lost between 8.1 and 8. I mean, because you're talking exponentially, the increase of acidity and the destruction of that alkalinity causes an environment that's not conducive for marine life to survive. And this is what's happening in the human body. So to pick out and name an RNA fragment that's been identified by PCR testing at being 79% equivalent to, you know, a virus, which has really not been identified, which is actually more identifiable towards what is called an exosome, which is actually a good guy, not a bad guy. You pull that out of a trillion diversities, you know, and focus on one, which has not been demonstrated scientifically using the scientific method to even be harmful to the body. What is happening in the body is the same thing that's happening in the oceans. It's happening in the air. I mean, it's evident that we can look at air pollution and say that's toxic. We can see it with our own eyes. We can see pollution and the devastation of air pollution in the forests of Denali, or the destruction of our oceans and the pollution that's being gathered there. But when something doesn't exist or is invisible, and we're trying to identify that by some sort of testing of an RNA where the debate is not settled, whether it's living or not living, and then attaching that to be having some sort of virulence to causing disease, is like a huge leap. And this is the problem that was that HIV presented, because HIV being a so-called retrovirus or an RNA fragment, here again, that could cause harm to the body, has never been proven. So the association between the symptom, which is the acquired immune deficiency or the suppression of the immune deficiency, and a so-called virus, which has never been scientifically isolated, purified, cultured, and then demonstrated to cause disease, we have taken a huge leap. A symptom with a invisible virus or a non-existent virus, which you know, scientists, some scientists have admitted that in all intents and purposes, the exosome, which comes out of the cell as a protecting and as a support to the immune system, somehow has become the virus. And looking under electron microscopy, you know, the exosome and the so-called HIV or the COVID-19 virus, the exosome, they're pretty much identical. You can't see the difference between them structurally. If you're testing the the DNA, the RNA using PCR testing of COVID-2, which was the virus of 2002, and then COVID-19, which you're testing RNA fragments.
Was that SARS? Was that SARS?
Yeah, well, SARS is an acronym that stands for severe acute respiratory syndrome. And the reason why it's a syndrome is because anything that's not settled or is not scientifically proven goes into the category of a syndrome because it's not understood. And yet there's all these statements, as a matter of fact, that this thing exists, that this thing causes sickness, and yet it's a syndrome which has no pathology. So the reason I'm saying this is that my research is taking me, in conjunction with Dr. Galina Magalko, to study the genesis of a symptom. So I just published a paper in last of January, 1st of February, on SARS, on respiratory disorders, particularly associated, tying the genesis to severe acute respiratory disorders or syndromes, to the interstitial fluids of the largest organ of the human body, which is the interstitium. So the interstitium was only recognized by American scientists in 1918. So there's no real strong education foundation, nor is there anyone in the United States that I know of that's testing the biochemistry beginning in the interstitial fluids of the interstitium to prove out that this is the origin of cellular breakdown that's causing the release of the exosomes, that's then activating the immune system, and the same thing with HIV, that the exosome is coming, or the so-called virus is coming from, it's endogenously created. It doesn't come from without. There's no infection. That's what I'm saying. So I had to generate a whole new language. And what I'm talking about is not an infection where a germ invades the body and causes sickness, or you sneeze and those so-called germs or genetic factors, you take that in, and that is the cause of the disease. Comes back to Pasteurian theory. What I'm talking about is completely opposite of that. What I'm talking about is the disease is born in us and from us, and it's in direct relationship to the fluids that surround the cell. So if I say the word intravascular fluids, the first thing that should come to your mind is, oh, that's the fluids that make up the blood. And if I say interstitial fluids, you should think then, oh, those are the fluids that surround all the cells of the human body, that surrounds every cell that make up every organ. So all the 70 trillion cells are in a pool of fluid. That pool of fluid
is that our blood? Is that our blood, or
no? It's not our blood. No, it's totally separate than blood. So you have three basic fluids of the body. You have intravascular fluids. That's blood fluids.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that's a system. That's one fluid which is closed. Okay, and then you have a second fluid. The second fluid is interstitial fluid. Interstitial fluid surrounds all of the body cells. It's not surrounded by blood, it's surrounded by interstitial fluid. Those fluids make up an organ called the interstitium, which is the largest organ of the body. Now, the interstitial fluid has compartments, and it holds this fluid, but it also holds the waste products being hydrostatically pushed out into the interstitial fluid. So metabolic waste, dietary waste. For example, if you drink too much alcohol, it goes to the blood, and then from the blood, it goes into the interstitial fluids, that affect the organs of the cells of the liver or the brain or what have you. So the blood cannot take any decrease in its pH. So it protects itself by moving its waste products, whether introduced by the environment or introduced by the food you eat, or introduced by metabolism, metabolic processes, cellular function. It moves all of this into the interstitial fluids, which then flow into a sewer system called the lymphatic system to remove either through perspiration, respiration, defecation, or urination. So the lymphatic system, as somebody says, well, the lymphatic system is a system that's 2 to 3 times larger than the circulatory system. But wherever the blood flows, the lymphatic flows. Okay, but the lymphatic flow comes from the fluids of the interstitium. So lymphatic fluid is not lymphatic fluid, it's interstitial fluid. That fluid comes from the fluids that are surrounding. The waste comes from the third fluid, which is called intracellular fluid. So now there's 3 fluids: intravascular, interstitial, and intracellular. Intra means within. So within the cell, there's fluid, and cells who are metabolizing and functioning. Every function of the cell produces a waste product. That waste product gets deposited into the compartments of the interstitial fluids of the interstitium organ. From there, it's stored for removal, like a septic tank. It's then removed through the lymphatic system, out through the pores of the skin, or through urination. That's why I've always said that if you want to have a general idea of the pH of the interstitial fluid, you have to test the urine, because the urine is not a product of the blood. It's a product of the toxins from the blood that are put into the interstitial fluids and eliminated out through the lymphatic system to the urinary tract system, out through the kidney, what have you.
Are these all keys to coming up with a antidote for COVID?
Well, the antidote, you have to first understand the cause. And when you understand that what happens if the body can't remove its own waste product, okay, from whatever source, then okay, the body dies. So the genesis of all sickness and disease, and going back to COVID, okay, or SARS, severe acute respiratory syndrome, I'm telling you the pathology. It's never been identified. Okay, that's why this paper is so important, because it's the first paper that actually outlines the pathology of SARS. And it's not viral. Okay, the pathology of SARS is in the genesis. The genesis of SARS begins in the fluids from cellular functionality or glandular function that makes up glands and organs and tissues. All of those wastes, if not eliminated, can cause deterioration or membrane breakdown and cause genetic mutation. The genetic mutation in the RNA that is being tested in these PCR tests is coming from the cellular breakdown caused by a polluted environment. So now we have to decide, okay, what are the contributing factors to cellular breakdown and genetic mutation and genetic breakdown that gives rise to DNA fragments and RNA fragments? There's 2 major ones. One is air pollution, okay? And Wuhan was ripe for this, okay? Because Wuhan is a factory city with 11 million people, and people are eating foods that are highly acidic. When I say highly acidic, I mean eating snake and bat I wouldn't say would be on the healthy side of managing and maintaining alkalinity, because the whole premise, hypothesis of this pathology is that the human body in perfect health is alkaline in its design. And when there's any sickness...
Tell us a little bit about your specialty. How many years you've been studying and teaching, not preaching, but teaching alkalinity? Because I want to tell the audience, we didn't give a backstory of you, that you are the alkaline king. I mean, in our food world.
Well, I've been studying it probably, and here again, line upon line, precept upon precept, here a little, there a little, for the last 40 years. And so having a background in nutrition, having a background in biochemistry, having a background from studying at the Enderlin Institute, the Bradford Institute, having this background, and then sampling the blood of hundreds of thousands of people and asking specific questions. What are you eating? What are you drinking? What is your emotional state? And comparing lifestyles to the effects on blood. I have got, since the 80s, I've been taking pictures of corona cells and the effect, because the corona effect, which is the breakdown of the membrane and the birth of these spicules that come off, or the crowning or knobbing of the cell, is not new. I mean, hematology, this is in hematology books, but I've been taking pictures using phase contrast microscopy, using dark field, using electron microscopy, taking pictures of this for over 3 decades.
So alkalinity is a key to either being extra incredibly healthy, where cancer cannot live, and corona has a weaker opportunity to come in. And by drinking alkaline water, we can pee more to release whatever we have.
Well, corona doesn't come in, it comes out. Corona is an effect of cellular breakdown, of genetic mutation, based upon the imbalances, or the imbalance in the biochemistry of the interstitial fluids of the interstitium. When we are testing these types of patients, they're in what we call decompensated metabolic acidosis. In other words, the pH of the interstitial fluids has dropped below 7.3 and now is at 7.265. And if it drops below 7.1, you're dead. Now we're talking about a movement from ideal, which is at 7.365, to 7.1. We're talking a movement of 0.2 of 1 point. So you're talking about 0.2 to 0.25 movement from what is normal and healthy to death. And the best way to think about this is, if you hold your breath for 4 minutes, what happens?
You turn blue.
Okay, then what happens if you keep holding it?
Out, you faint.
And then what happens if you don't get any oxygen?
You start coughing and you pass out.
Okay, is that a mucus cough, or is that a dry cough?
I would say dry cough.
Right, that's the symptom of COVID. It's oxygen deprivation, caused by an overacidification of the blood and then interstitial fluids. The cells are breaking down, the red blood cells. Now, there's two major molecules or compounds, one compound, one molecule, compounds in the human body that buffer excess acidity. The stomach is responsible for making this. It's called sodium bicarbonate. It makes it throughout the day for you to neutralize the acids of the food and also neutralize the acids of metabolism in cellular function.
That's what breaks down your food when you eat it.
Yeah, so what happens is, when you eat food, it literally saturates the food with sodium bicarbonate. The only thing left is hydrochloric acid, which is the waste product of the cellular of the biochemistry. The biochemistry is H2O plus NaCl, which is salt, plus CO2, which is carbon dioxide, equals NaHCO3 plus HCl. What that is salt plus water plus carbon dioxide equals sodium bicarbonate plus hydrochloric acid. Hydrochloric acid is a waste product of sodium bicarbonate production. And this is why medicine is failing. It's failing because it doesn't understand the foundations of physiology and the body's alkaline, I call it the alkaline buffering system, to manufacture and release sodium bicarbonate in all of the different body's fluids, into the intravascular fluids, into the interstitial fluids. So if you're eating a diet high in BAT, living in a city that is highly polluted with methane, and you have to understand, if you can pass gas, and that gas goes through your underwear and your pants, what do you think a mask is going to do? I mean, it does nothing.
If you smell it, that means you're getting those molecules.
That's correct. So I don't know anybody that farts where a mask would actually help. And I don't even understand the whole face mask thing because any of these agents, these chemicals, are so fine they pass right through the membranes of the cloth. If someone farts and you have a mask on, you will smell it.
And that means you're getting it.
That's correct. So if you're in an environment that's toxic with methane, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and then that's air pollution, right? So you've got chemistry. Now within that, there could be other compounds. There could be barium, there could be aluminum oxide, there could be cesium, there could be other points in there, other compounds. I'm just mentioning a few. There could be several hundred different compounds that you're breathing in that's coming out of into the city. Right. This is why New York City has so many problems. All the major cities where they have air pollution problems have this problem. But there's one other factor in this. If you understand that sodium bicarbonate then is the number one alkaline buffer to managing and maintaining the alkaline design of your body, and then you understand that the second buffer of the human body is the blood and its use of hemoglobin, which is the so-called oxygen carrier, but the hemoglobin to buffer excess acidity, then if hemoglobin is being used to buffer acidity, then what happens is you got deterioration of the red blood cells. You end up with the corona effect. And this is all caused by air pollution. And then you add on, you flip the switch on first generation, second generation, third generation, fourth generation, fifth generation electromagnetic frequencies running anywhere from 1 to 1.5 gigahertz up to 60 gigahertz, which literally
you're talking about Wi-Fi?
Yeah, I'm talking about Wi-Fi now. I'm talking about electromagnetic pulsating frequencies.
3G, 4G, and now 5G.
Yeah, well, 5G is just talking about the push, the force. But any electrical on a study that we did in London in conjunction with CNN, not CNN, but BBC, Dr. Beverly Rubik published my work in. We did the study in 1999. It was a controlled study. It was double blinded. We had a negative group that wasn't being exposed to EMF, and then we had another group which was being exposed to EMF for between 8 to 12 hours. And so all the work has been done, and that was on 2G, showing that any electromagnetic frequency, artificial, developed frequency that's man-made, here again at 1.5 gigahertz, can cause oxygen deprivation, which oxygen deprivation happens when there's damage to the cell membrane. Okay, when there's damage to the cell membrane, or then you end up with coagulation of the blood. And one of the major symptoms of COVID is what is called DIC, disseminated intravascular coagulation. I wrote my doctorate on this for one of my 3 doctorates. I wrote the paper entitled Pathological Blood Coagulation. And in that, I wrote pathologies that causes this blood clotting that's happening with people that are passing out and dying as if they're holding their breath. Now, this is a very important point you need to understand. And most people don't know this. Okay, they don't know this. And that is the opening into the alveoli, the air sacs, to get oxygen. The blood has to go from the vascular system into the capillary system. Well, the door to get into the capillary system is 3 to 5 microns. Now, a micron is 1/25,000th of an inch. A red blood cell, which is flexible, pliable, it can bend and squeeze, is approximately 7 to 7.5 microns. So when the blood wants to go in and get oxygen from the lung, it has to go into the capillary system, and it has to pass through a door, it's kind of like a camel walking through a needle. Okay, it has to crouch down, or it has to take off all of its backpack and squeeze into. So it has to go into an opening that's 3 to 5 microns, and it cannot do that if it's in groups. This is called pathological blood coagulation. The question that I asked in my dissertation is, why is the blood prematurely coagulating inside the vascular system? That was the question. Causing oxygen deprivation, which can then lead to death, like holding your breath.
So coagulation
is what's causing this? And
where the blood is grouping together.
Yeah, pathological blood coagulation is where one blood cell sticks to another blood cell that sticks to another, and it forms clots.
And it can't get through the needle.
It can't get through the needle, the eye of the needle.
Right.
So what happens is people who have symptoms have oxygen deprivation. So the symptoms are lightheadedness, dizziness, muddle thinking, forgetfulness, cold hands, cold feet. These are all symptoms of pathological blood coagulation, or a more serious medical term is called disseminated intravascular coagulation, that's caused by cellular breakdown, the loss of chlorophyll, a declining pH, not necessarily represented in the intravascular fluids, because this is very important, that any waste product, in order to maintain the integrity of the blood, is pushed out in the interstitial fluids. So intravascular fluids only represent 10% of the total body fluids. Now that's a very important percentage when you're considering that 10% is being equated to the entire body. You've got 10% of the information. 80% of the other information is on the other side of that wall. That wall that separates blood plasma from interstitial fluid. All of the waste products going in there. So I published this in 2015, and I presented it in 2019 in London. And I published this with Dr. Galina Migalko, who's a medical doctor and a scientist and a researcher, and specializes specifically in non-invasive medical diagnostics. So we tested the structures of all the organs using ultrasound, but it's a complete whole body ultrasound. We test the physiology by using thermography, but we do two things that no one in the country is doing. We are literally testing the biochemistry of the interstitial fluids, and then without any invasion, we're testing all the parameters of the intravascular fluids inside the blood vessels without drawing a drop of blood. Now, the importance of that is there's no room or very little room for human error. Because if you've ever done a blood test, they take the blood, they mix it with coagulants or anticoagulants, they put it into a centrifuge, they spin it, and they separate the various components. And this is
Right.
what has to be done, even with viral. And what they're ending up with are different components which are measured after going through all this entire process. We don't have to do that. We can actually test all the parameters of the blood, all the parameters of the interstitial fluids, compare that, which gives us 100% picture. So now, what did we find? We published it in 2015. We just published it on SARS, severe acute respiratory syndrome. We now have a pathology. The pathology, the origin of SARS is in the interstitial fluids. What is happening? The pH is dropping. The fluids are becoming toxic. The people in all cases that are having symptomologies, not asymptomatic, but symptomologies of dry coughing, shortness of breath, fever, what have you. This is all showing up in the interstitial fluids as decompensated acidosis of the interstitium organ. Now, if this continues, then what happens is this acidosis spills over not only into the lymphatic system to get rid of it. If it can't get rid of it, it spills back into the intravascular fluids, which then causes decompensated acidosis of the blood. And this is when we have a severe condition where we have emergency care. And to ventilate the patient when blood cannot get there, you end up killing people with the treatment. You understand? You cannot respirate these people. You cannot put a ventilator on them because you're forcing air that the body can't do anything with, because there's no pathway in through the eye of the needle into the lungs, because the blood is in pathological blood coagulation. So what's causing that? Two things.
Do we need to
poisoning and radiation poisoning?
So do we need to teach more about your paper that you're reintroducing for prevention?
Well, prevention, absolutely. Prevention is the cure of all sickness and disease. But you have to understand the causation of the pathology of this. If you're being exposed by radiation, which can deteriorate cell membrane, causing pathological coagulation, or destroy the hemoglobin at 60 gigahertz, where even if the cell was in a single nature, to be able to, some of that is, or the person would be dead, some of that would be passed into the lung to pick. But if there's no hemoglobin there, there's nothing to attract. The iron's not there to attract the oxygen into the hemoglobin, which is the carrier of the oxygen. So you end up with oxygen deprivation. You end up with this shortness of breath. You can't get enough air. You can't get enough air.
Are we making any correlation? Not correlations. Are we coming back in a circle from the conversation to 2G, 3G, 4G, now 5G? Is that because I heard that 5G was in New York and 5G was in Wuhan?
Well, they flipped the switch. Contributing factors in combination with the diet, that contributing factor in combination with the air pollution, that's a contributing factor. In combination with whatever herbicides or pesticides that are in the food too that they're eating, that's a contributing factor. If you're eating GMO food, here again, that's foreign to the body, that's a contributing factor. GMO food or genetically modified organisms that are foreign activates the immune system. So whether it's coming from food, whether it's coming from bat, or whether it's being injected, which is another contributing factor. And the interesting thing is that 67% of all Americans were vaccinated for the flu. Prior, so here you've got vaccination, and you're introducing aluminum oxide, you're introducing formaldehyde, you're introducing mercury thimerosal, you're introducing microzymas or DNA or RNA from human or animal source. These are all toxic, and the idea is this: if we put a little poison into the body, then of course it's similar to whatever we're trying to identify as the virus, even though there is not a single virus that has ever been scientifically identified, isolated, purified, and cultured to cause any disease.
So that theory of introducing with a vaccine the same poison is like, I heard recently that there was COVID patients that were not immune. Like they say, if you get it, you're like the mumps and measles or whatever, or chickenpox, you're never going to get it again. But I heard that there are some COVID patients that have turned around and got it again.
Well, because they're exposed to these contributing factors. Radiation, electromagnetic frequencies does affect the human biofield, which causes pathological blood coagulation that leads to oxygen deprivation.
And radiation is Wi-Fi, correct?
Well, Wi-Fi, cell phones, computers, we're being bombarded by all of this man-made frequencies from electric cars, from a hairdryer, from a microwave oven. I mean, we live in the soup.
In your experience, is there I have, for example, I have some of these in my world. Is there anything that that protects us from Wi-Fi? If I were to wear this, I mean, are there amulets or for my audience, it'd be great to not give the answer, but to suggest what they can go out to do, leaving the getting away from the show. I mean, when they leave my show today, I want to have people have a little bit of, you were talking about fear in the beginning, fear, what that stands for.
Fear creates a biological function. I mean, if you're fearful of something, then of course you've got functionality of cells going on that produces an increase of metabolic acidosis. Metabolic acids such as lactic acid or uric acid, whatever the acid is, pollutes the interstitial fluids, which affects the cells, which then fear then becomes a contributing factor to the breakdown of cell membranes, genetic mutations, the congestion or leading to pathological coagulation, thus leading to oxygen deprivation. EMF does the same.
Fear is stress.
Well, stress is a condition of acidity where the cells are not within their normal healthy environment, okay? And that environment is an alkaline environment at a pH of 7.365. So what I was getting at is everyone we test in cancer, everyone we test with a degenerative or chronic disease are in decompensated acidosis of the interstitial fluids of the interstitium, the largest organ of the human body. What I just got through saying is the fluids that surround all of our cells are toxic. Breaking down the cells, breaking down the organs is a systemic problem that's affecting every organ, every gland, every tissue, because the health of organs and tissues and glands, which are made up by our cells, which are then made up of smaller entities called microzymas, which is indestructible matter, begins to evolve or go into pleomorphism, giving rise to bacteria, yeast, or mold. These are born in us and from us. We think they're coming from the outside world, but they're created from the inside world. So the way we protect us, one of the most important things, you have to be willing to change your diet. You have to be willing to remove from your diet acidic contributing factors of beef, chicken, pork, and fish, of vinegar, alcohol, other contributing factors that are causing an acidification of the interstitial fluids.
Is there
You also have to limit.
Is there a way to check daily your acidity with a strip?
So you test your daily acidity by testing the urine, because that is an indirect way to test the pH of your interstitial fluids. That pH should be at least 7.2 or greater. If it's lower, you're in harm's way. Your fluids of the surrounding the cells are compromised, and therefore you are predestined to express a symptomology which then is labeled as a disease. Cancer is not a disease. Diabetes is not a disease. Coronavirus is not a disease. The infection is not a disease. It's a symptom of cellular breakdown, which has been labeled as a disease to continue the false narrative that germs cause disease, which they don't.
Is there a bottom line that big pharma's keeping us in this so they can?
To sell vaccines to produce some sort of fake immunity, as if the white blood cells, such as, you've got different types of lymphocytes, B lymphocytes, T lymphocytes, that release oxygen species to help neutralize the metabolic waste or the dietary waste or the environmental waste that's now sitting in your interstitial fluids. You got to get rid of that. The immune system activates and shows up. Lymphocytes generally don't show up unless there's a severe condition in the blood. You can find them, but not in great quantity. So when
do you have on your website some products that people can go to? Can they come to you for some?
Well, I don't specifically have any products, but there are products, and there are people that sell products that I developed and designed, and it's their companies, and they're marketing those. But no, my affiliation was as a scientist and as a biochemist to develop and nutritionist to develop products that would support the alkaline design of the body. So the answer is absolutely yes. The website is phmiracleproducts.com. That's phmiracleproducts.com, and there you can see a list of foundational products that build red blood cells, that increase red blood count. That's why you look at athletes like Tom Brady at the age of 42, and you wonder, what is he doing? He's doing what he's now learned on how to manage and maintain the alkaline design of the body fluids, and how to build an abundance of life force energy, and how to strengthen the cell membranes through what you eat, what you drink, what you breathe, what you think, what you feel, and what you believe. And so even beliefs become biology. So this idea that generates fear of this invisible COVID-19 virus, which has not been scientifically identified, is a figment of virology, and to continue this narrative of the germ theory, when in reality we're dealing with a terrain problem, we're dealing with an environmental problem. If you see a swamp and there's a nest of mosquitoes, you don't kill the mosquitoes, you clean up the swamp. But the germ theory mentality and the whole protocol for that is kill the mosquito. But the mosquito is not the problem, it's the swamp. The mosquito doesn't create the swamp. Just like flies. If you've got a problem with flies, and you don't like flies, they bother you, you have to get rid of the garbage. I mean, if you stink, you will attract flies. If your skin is toxic, you will attract mosquitoes. They're not the problem. The problem comes from within. So you have to take out the garbage. And the way you take out the garbage is understanding the basic principles. I call it the cows principle. This stands for chlorophyll, oil, water, and salt. These are the foundational elements, the four cornerstones of good health. You have to have products or food that are high in chlorophyll because that's what builds the hemoglobin. If we look at the molecular structure of chlorophyll, it's identical to what? The hemoglobin, other than the center atom. What we find by measuring red blood cell counts in a cancer patient or in someone who has an infectious condition that is labeled infectious, but it's not coming from the outside, it's coming from the inside. When we see declining pHs, we know that in order to support the garbage collection service, which is the immune system, which provides no immunity whatsoever. That's a fairy tale.
Right.
White blood cells are garbage collectors. They emit certain compounds. We say, okay, or proteins, antibodies.
Do they call them grabbers? Do they call them grabbers?
Well, they're collectors. They're garbage collectors. They're sanitation engineers. And the way you support them is by maintaining internal cleanliness. The way you maintain internal cleanliness is by what you drink, what you eat, what you breathe, what you think, what you feel, what you believe, where you live, how you live, your exposure to some of these toxic environments. If you live in New York City, the best thing you could do is leave. You know, if you don't want to be exposed to toxic environments and toxic lifestyles, because when you're talking about jails and prisons, what do they have? They have toxic water, they have toxic air, they have very little or no access to photons of light, because you're either in a cell or you're contained within an environment that has no sunlight. So you have no option for vitamin D. Vitamin D3 and K1 are essential supplements that should be taken to support the alkaline design. Drinking and eating more green foods, so green juices, green vegetables, green fruit, like avocados, broccoli, spinach, celery. These are the things. Getting away from high acidic foods like apples and oranges and pears and bananas that put more acid into your body. You substitute foods. Getting away from foods that are anti-nutrient, that provide no nutrient value, that build no stem cell in the human body, and that would be beef, chicken, pork, and fish, that put genetically modified matter into your body, or you end up with fragmented DNA and RNA of a cow or a sheep or whatever else you're eating.
So this is a commercial for growing your own garden.
Well, the advice that I received from a wise person, I would call him a prophet when I was in my 20s. He said, Dr. Young, if I had your age, your money, I would move to a large property and become a farmer and grow your own food. Well, that happened 20 years ago when we moved to the Rancho del Sol. And I had, 7,000 avocado trees. I had, 1,000 grapefruit trees. I was growing my own spinach, sprouting, what have you, over 7,000 tons of food. And then any excess we would either give back or sell back, and this was my dream of being a farmer. In fact, that's the first thing that I generally tell people. Well, what's your background? And I say farming. I'm an internal environmentalist. I teach people how to manage and maintain the internal alkaline design of the human body fluids. I'm an educator, and
Sure.
When you have all these, with people getting sick, that are getting sick in prison, you just have to look at the food they're eating, the environment where they're living, and you can say, hey, you don't have a chance in an environment like that. I mean, you have to have a lot of fortitude to withstand, the toxicity of a toxic environment for any period of time. And so if they want to associate that to antibodies, those antibodies that are testing could be to air pollution. from the chemicals involved that to food pollution, the chemicals there. We're just going to label it COVID-19. People aren't dying of COVID-19. They're dying from an inverted way of living, an inverted way of eating, an inverted way of drinking, an inverted way of breathing, an inverted way of thinking, an inverted way of feeling, and an inverted way of believing.
So give our audience a little menu. Say we're at Robert Young's cafe today. This is your new show, the Robert Young Cafe.
Well, what I would do is I'd offer you fresh green juice, and that would be from organic, non-GMO food of spinach, celery, cucumber. If you were just new on this, I may even put a little green apple in there for you, just to satisfy your taste buds from your previous acidic lifestyle and diet. Okay, so I mean, sugar is more addictive than heroin, based on animal studies. So I mean, what can we say about sugar? You know, it's hard to give up. We're all addicted to it, to a lesser or greater degree. But it is poison. Our bodies do not run on sugar. Our body runs on electrons, electrical photon light, which can be converted into electron.
I read the book that said sugar feeds cancer.
Well, sugar doesn't feed cancer. It creates cancer.
Oh, okay.
Okay. In other words, sugar is an acid that breaks down the cell membrane that causes genetic mutation, which then can domino effect, causing a systemic interstitial fluid. But anyone in a cancer's condition, because it should be used as an adjective, not as a noun. Cancer is not a thing. It's not like a cat or dog. COVID or coronavirus is not a thing. It's not a cat or dog. It's a condition. It's a symptom of cellular breakdown, genetic mutation due to decompensated acidosis of the interstitial fluids of the interstitium and then the vascular fluids. That's when you die.
So finish your menu.
So the menu then is, I could also make you up a green shake, which the base of that would be organic avocado. I generally like the Haas avocado. And we would put in there the cucumber, the spinach leaf. I mean, you can use all kinds of arugula, whatever leaf you want to use. If you like mint, you could put mint in there. Ginger, I love ginger.
Mulberry leaves off my mulberry tree.
Mulberry tree, you can use the mulberry tree. In fact, the mulberry leaf is what our iJuice chlorophyll is made from.
Thank you.
It's a pure mulberry leaf chlorophyll.
Thank you.
We're the only one that has it in the world.
So finish your menu. Finish your menu.
Okay, so you can have a shake or a juice. Then also, if you wanted something a little more hearty, I don't want to use a carbohydrate, so I'm going to use a seed. That seed is called gretchka in Russian, but it's known as buckwheat. Buckwheat, the reason I mention it in Russian, because the Russians who suffered probably as one of the great nations that suffered more than any other nation, and any loss of life is terrible. But these people literally went into poverty. And the only thing that kept these, not the only thing, but one of the major foods that kept these people alive was gretchka, I should say, and which is buckwheat. And buckwheat is a seed. Therefore, it's a high protein seed. I love to take and cut up heirloom tomatoes, organic heirloom tomatoes, and then add to that.
You sprout your buckwheat. Tell everybody that
you can sprout any seed. You can sprout the buckwheat. You can have it warm or cold. I like it warmed.
It's great.
I add the tomato. I add avocado with this, and oh man, I literally could live on this food. I'm getting hungry just thinking about it. But this is what the Russians did. They lived on this food, and that's how they survived. They survived really nothing other than what they grew in their gardens, and of course sprouted. And of course, when you're sprouting something, generally you're doing it out of soil. All of my sprouts for my iJuices that I juice are all sprouted in soil. So you get all the rich elements of that particular soil,
and
which is very, very important.
I heard from from the doctor down in Florida at the Optimal Institute there that when you take fruit or vegetables and you blend them, that in 12 or 15 minutes they oxidize. So you should be drinking them in a fairly, not the next day.
Well, yeah, you juice what you drink, and you drink what you juice. I mean, and the sooner you do that, I mean, we juice it fresh, we drink it. I mean, refrigeration, that's why we have it, can slow down the process. Putting it in a glass bottle, capping it, or into stainless steel, you slow down that process. But it's always better to juice and drink what you're juicing. But if you overjuice and have leftover, then you can put it in a container, put it in the refrigerator, and it generally is still viable because it's not exposed to outside oxygen to fermentation.
And how much water should we be drinking a day? How much water?
Well, you drink approximately if you're having any type of symptomology, it's approximately for 30 pounds you're drinking 1 liter. If you're on maintenance, then it's for every 50 pounds, it's or around 25 kilos. You're drinking approximately 1 liter. So approximately 4 liter. A liter is equal to approximately a quart. And so you're drinking at least 4 quarts minimum. Ideally, if you have any symptoms, then you're drinking between 6 to 8 liters. And that water needs to be purified. That water needs to be functionally structured, which means it needs to be a small molecule clustering, just like the blood that goes into the capillary system. Water can't go into the cell unless it's in a monomolecular state. So the water has to be broken apart. That's the purpose of ionization. So the ionization breaks apart the coagulation of water molecules, thus increasing greater surface area, which creates greater surface charge, which then also can then pass from the outside of the cell into the cell for charging or releasing its electrical activity. So water that is a pH between 9.5 and 10 at a charge of negative 250 up to 750 millivolts, that's functionally structured, that's been purified prior to alkalization, ionization. This is very important. So it has to be.
Can you buy that water, or do you have to make it?
You can't buy it. It doesn't exist on the planet anymore. You have to actually make it yourself. And you have to have a system in order to make functionally structured, ionized, alkaline, electron-rich water.
And they can learn from that on your site about.
Yeah, you can learn about it. We have several offerings, not on my site, but at phmiracleproducts.com.
Right.
They can purchase alkalize. We have a multifunctional alkalizing ionization system to help people to create the ideal type of water. And the reason why you want to do that is because that supports the white cells in the release of extra electrons, OH minus or SO minus. These are oxygen species that are released, taking in more nascent oxygen, atomic oxygen, through putting drops in the water of potassium hydroxide or magnesium hydroxide. You can either take it in liquid form in water, or you can take it by capsule.
Or what about minerals? What about minerals?
Well, minerals are very, very important. The minerals I'm talking about are basically sodium, potassium, calcium, and magnesium, which are your electrolytes. I created a product called 4 Salts, and of course, 4 Salts contains certain electrolytes in a compound of either bicarbonate or carbonate form to help support the stomach purpose, and its main purpose is maintaining the alkaline design of the body, neutralizing the hydrochloric acid in the bodies, discontinuing taking enzymes, probiotics, with this idea of the microbiome, that we need all this fragments of DNA and RNA from different foods, that in that environment of the small intestine, which has a surface area of 7,000 200 square feet, that in that environment, that's the environment, and it has to be in an alkaline state at 8.4, preferably pristine, without all the distractions and all the trillions of diversities, to try to get pure, clean, alkaline fluids and plant proteins into that in a liquefied or pureed form, so that, and also oils, polyunsaturated oils that can make the membranes of stem cells, which are created in the crypts of the small intestine. There's no digestion that takes place in the stomach. There's no digestion that takes place in the small intestine. What takes place in the stomach is it's an alkalization factory. The pancreas secretes alkalinity. The gallbladder secretes alkalinity to prepare that food at a pH of 8.4 to be biologically transformed into an embryonic state, into an embryonic stem cell, into an erythroblast, into an erythrocyte, that then can become all of the different body cells. It is the red blood cell that becomes the brain, that becomes the bone. If you're having bone loss, if you're having muscle loss, this is an intestinal core problem. Core health. If you want health in the core, if you want health in the bones, you have to have health in the navel. Health in the navel brings marrow to the bones, not the reverse. So if you want health in the navel, then marrow to the bones. And then if you want strength in the loins and the sinews, that has to come from a pristine, clean, alkaline environment, which is the small intestine, which is the stem cell factory of producing the embryonic cells that become new blood at 5 million red blood cells per second. If you're not producing at the level that the body needs, then you go into body wasting. It's called reverse transformation. And your body cells are then converted to blood. And this is critical, particularly if you're in oxygenation deprivation. You saw in the news, you saw this big bodybuilder who had all this muscle, and he was in the hospital being treated. He was on a ventilator for I think 30 days. He lost all his muscle mass. And the reason why is because his muscle was being converted to blood to keep him alive, because he was in oxygen deprivation. And the healing took place naturally, not by anything, I believe, that was being done at the hospital. That if you want to start breathing again, you have to understand that it starts in the fluids of the body and how those fluids affect and what you're eating, what you're drinking, what you're breathing, and the environment that you're exposed to. You have to protect your outside environment and your inside environment. Disease then is born in us. This illusion that there's an infection is just that. It's a scientific myth.
And what about probiotics? How do they fit into the
same problem? Antibiotics, probiotics pollute the core that does not provide the foundational elements for building embryonic cells. What are they? These are chlorophyll, oil, water, and salt. Not probiotics in there.
What about fermented foods?
Same problem. Fermented is like, not drinking your greens, first. You're just letting them sit and rot and ferment and become sour. People don't understand. We don't get old, we mold. And by eating moldy food just accelerates the molding of you. So when someone has a yeast infection, not infection, because it's created from the inside. This is not coming, mold and it can come from the outside, and it can contribute, but it can't cause specific disease. I mean, yes, environments have to be clean. I mean, if you have a moldy house and you're breathing that in, that gets into the body fluids, and that can cause a disturbance and a cleanliness problem of the interstitial fluids.
Carpet.
But when we're looking at a yeast infection created from within, so pneumonia, for example, okay, pneumonia's had more deaths, by the way, than the illusionary COVID deaths, which has been manipulated. So pneumonia is a yeast infection of the lungs. It's a respiratory disorder of the interstitial fluids that have gone acidic, causing cellular breakdown, which then gives rise to yeast. So more people are dying from pneumonia. So how do you stop that? You stop that by understanding you have to manage and maintain the delicate pH balance of the internal fluids of the body with what you eat, what you drink, what you breathe, what you feel, what you believe, what you think, where you live. You have to control this.
How can we be proactive with our prisons now that we're seeing the syndrome pop in? How do we get good, clean food or water into their prisons massively?
Well, that has to change, because in prisons, what they feed you is texturized protein. And texturized protein or isolated soy protein is not food. In fact, you get cabbage, chopped up cabbage. That's the best food that they serve, but it's GMO too. So it's not organic. So it probably has glyphosates in it. It's got chemicals in it that cause sickness and disease. But the whole idea in a prison, I believe, is to literally turn people into non-humans, to suppress them by poisoning them with light, poisoning them with food, poisoning them by containment. There's no humanity at all in our prisons.
Light deprivation
by separation of loved ones or containment or isolation. You're literally destroying people when you isolate people.
So it's time to be done with
to touch, to feel, to hold, to hug, to exchange feelings, to exchange this whole idea of isolation is disease causing.
Right.
And when people become depressed, they become depressed because their internal environments are altering, causing cellular breakdown. And how can anybody who doesn't feel good think good?
Right.
So you're really not rehabilitating a prisoner. You're actually creating more problems that when they come out, you've got human beings that are no longer human beings.
They're
genetically modified human beings.
That's why puppies and pets and stories and music and colors are so important. I remember a study they did where they painted the cells pink. They did different colors, in prisons, and how it calmed them down. And so our environment and our love, like you're saying, the hugs, does help you to calm down and to feel connected.
Yeah, daily regular exercise in the jails and the prisons does not exist, where you can actually go and sweat, get your bodies moving, oxygenating, getting outside air. I mean, going to the beach, which has been then condemned in California, is one of the best things you can do to breathe in salt air. It's alkalizing.
It's wonderful.
To condemn that, to literally soak in the photons of light that are biologically transformed by your pineal gland into electrical energy, to be subjected to fluorescent light and take an artificial light and then put into a jail cell where there's no natural light, or in my case, to not even see the sunlight for 3 months.
So what is the agenda, without condemning ourselves or getting too deep onto controversy? What's the agenda of humans right now and our longevity? How are we going to survive this, lengthen our telomeres and our heart, and come back to square? I think with no cars, we're finding out that people are getting better because there's no pollution in the air, or less.
Well, that's the silver lining. The air pollution has been reduced.
Right.
So our factory pollution has decreased. As far as slaughterhouses and killing of animals, which is barbaric. I mean, this has been reduced too. People are inside. This is not good. They're in containment, in isolation. This can create more problems than they solve.
So maybe online yoga outside.
We need to be outside. We need to be, you need to circulate to percolate. If you're not moving your body, if you're sitting around watching television, you're going to get depressed. You're going to put on weight. And when body puts on weight, all it's doing is trying to protect itself from metabolic acids that are not properly being eliminated. They get parked on into the fatty tissues. So I wrote a book about that called The pH Miracle for Weight Loss. But a lot of this can be found in my books: The pH Miracle, The pH Miracle for Weight Loss, The pH Miracle for Diabetes, The pH Miracle for Heart Disease, The pH Miracle for Cancer. You know, Sick and Tired is a very, very popular book right now because it talks about the foundation of what we're dealing with here, which is an environmental problem, not a germ problem. That we need to learn how to take care of the internal environment with what we eat, what we drink, what we breathe, and what we think. And that there are foods at the store that we have to processed foods, foods that are full of chemicals. We need to buy organic. We need to start growing our own food. We need to start sprouting. We need to start exercising. We need to start sweating to remove these. The sweat is nothing more than interstitial fluid coming from inside the body, outside the blood, the interstitial fluids being pushed out to the lymphatic system, out through the pores of the skin. Sweating is good. You know,
releasing our toxins. It releases our toxins.
It releases the acids that are contained within the compartments of the interstitial fluids of the interstitium. If you need to start breathing oxygen, in a non-polluted way, and you can't be wearing a mask while you're exercising. I mean, that's ridiculous. And this idea that you're contagious is also ridiculous. And this whole etiology of the germ theory, the germs cause disease, is here again, even on the deathbed of Louis Pasteur, who said to a family member, one of his grandsons said, "Look, I was wrong. Antoine Béchamp was right." And if you read the work of Antoine Béchamp, it makes perfect logical sense. None of what's going on is logical. It doesn't feel intuitively right. It's scientifically not right. We need to be moving. We need to be circulating. We need to be percolating. We need to be eliminating. Circulation to elimination. Circulation and elimination. Increase your water, the quality of the water. Start eating the right kinds of foods. Start exercising. If you want to go to the gym, that's fine. I don't go to the gym because I don't want the perspiration and the outgassing from all the other people in the room. That's why I don't support Bikram yoga, because if you go in there, you immediately smell the acidic gases that are coming off these people. That's not
interesting. Very interesting.
That is not a conducive environment. Nor would I walk into a polluted environment. That's why I don't live in New York. That's why I live on a farm at 2,000 feet. That's why, prior to coming to California, I lived at 5,000 feet, on a 5-acre, area that has.
I live in Sun Valley, Idaho, at 6,000 feet.
Yeah, if you look at the states that have the least amount of effect, because they're getting sunlight, they're getting outdoor, they're getting oxygen. Alaska, how many deaths in Alaska due to COVID?
Zero.
Wyoming, how many deaths associated to COVID? 0.
Because they're outdoors, they're in the sun.
I mean, Jackson Hole, if you're in an environment like this, you just don't get sick unless you do sick. And that's what I want to impress on people, is you don't get sick, you do it. You do cancer, you do diabetes, you do obesity, you do Alzheimer's, you do it with your thoughts, your words, your deeds. You have to look in the mirror and ask yourself this question: why are people sick? They're sick because they're doing it to themselves. based upon the environments they live on, their emotionality that they're dealing with, their belief systems.
And listening to the dark news,
Well, yeah.
Don't get me started, right?
Yeah, it's very, very addicting. The dark. It's like a drug. A chemical drug. Once you start it, you can't get off of it.
Well, I wanted to have a show. It was all the good news all the time. I'm talking about breakthroughs, talking about inventions. My father was an inventor. He followed Bucky Fuller his whole life. He had every book. He was an architect. He lived in Mexico for 30 years. And so he was one of my heroes, taught me about, we walked the pyramids, my father and I. We were in Palenque in 1977, my father and I.
Mm-hmm.
So great people give great examples on how to be. Everybody, we're with Dr. Robert Young today. We're so blessed to have you. No matter how long we went over our 1 hour, it doesn't matter. We need to just really understand, everybody, that it is about taking care of yourself and to listen to the people that fit your emotional state, and you can muscle test this episode and see how you feel about what we talked about today. Any final words, Dr. Young?
I just think, as we're talking about this, hopefully I said something that will inspire you to take personal responsibility for your life, and recognize the God-given right that this is your body, this is your life, and should always be your choice. And so, as far as mandating anything against our will is Luciferian. And it's not God-given. And so we need to be grateful for what we have. We have so much here in this great land. We need to recognize all of our blessings, but we also we all need to follow the great commandment, and that is to love one another. And not only and to begin with is to love ourselves. And when you get on a plane, they talk about what might happen, which is only happened maybe once in all the travels around the world, and that's if the airplane chamber loses oxygen, a mask will come down from the ceiling. And what they say is you have to first put on the mask on you before you put it on to anyone else. And so you need to love yourself first. You need to take care of yourself, because if you're not healthy, both in mind, body, and spirit, how can you help those people who you love and care about? So love yourself, love others, and God bless each and every one of you. And realize that you have the power. You have the power within to heal yourself from any sickness or disease. And you do not have to go to a place of fear. May I suggest you consider going to a place of faith, which is the first attribute in thinking healthy.
Thank you so much. And what does FEAR stand for again?
FEAR is an acronym that stands for false evidence appearing real. And so it is with cancer, with diabetes, with COVID, with influenza, flu. These are all symptoms of an acidic internal environment that gives rise to symptoms we call disease. But flu, the cough, the fever is the body in an alarming situation trying to bring harmony, peace, and love back to the physicality of our bodies. And that has to begin in the internal environment. And since we're predominantly water, alkaline, salty water, there's a way to do this that doesn't end up in your death. It can end up by not only changing your life, but saving your life. This is what I call the new biology, this new way of living, this new way of eating, this new way of breathing, this new way of thinking, this new way of feeling, this new way of believing.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And for all these years of dedication, we didn't discuss too much about your own knowledge of being on the inside, and maybe we'll save that for next time. We're about reform. We're about helping the prisoners now, and I want to have some really incredible, stories about what's going on in the prisons. How can we get green juice and clean water to them? Or is that a crusade? Is that something that I can assist with and help? Because it's my mission to get all the weed plant prisoners out that are in there for life in my lifetime. And thank you so much, Dr. Young, for being with us today and for giving us some of your anecdotes. And there's more. Go see him on his site. That's the phmiracle.com, everybody. And
my site is actually drrobertyoung.com, where you want to get my articles, my science, all this is free information. If you're interested in products, it's phmiracleproducts.com, but that's totally separate from me. My website is drrobertyoung.com.
Well, thank you so much, and we will see you on campus, and we're counting on you to give us the truth, and we'll have you back on as things change, and I'm really blessed that we're friends. We've known each other for years, and to spend this time with you is excellent. And everybody, don't panic, stay organic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hemp, hemp, hooray. And one last question, since I just said hemp. Is there any knowledge yet about CBD or any of the cannabinoids that assist us in our longevity that you
Absolutely. know? The cannabinoids have antioxidant values in the whole plant and also in the oils. CBD oil is incredible for supporting the immune system, for supporting its effort to maintain alkalinity, and also to prevent, the cellular breakdown and protection. So, CBD oil, hemp oil is one of my favorite oils that I combine with flax oil and borage oil and also avocado oil, and these are just wonderful oils. One that in isolation that I like also is black seed oil, which has many alkaloids in it that help to maintain. And that's why hydroxychloroquine works, because it basically increases the alkalinity of the fluids of the body. And in doing that, it prevents the symptoms that are associated with COVID. And here again, it's inexpensive. You don't have to vaccinate. All you have to do is start taking these alkaline oils of hemp and flax and borage. The pH Miracle Products offers those types of ingredients. But yeah, CBD oil and the cannabinoids act as antioxidants, very powerful antioxidants to manage and maintain the alkaline design of the internal fluids of the body.
So for prevention, the cannabinoids are good. I do a handful of hemp seed in my smoothie every day.
You can put the seeds in. You need to powderize that.
Right.
We blend it. The seeds. So the hemp seed, we offer a hemp seed and a hemp protein powder, but also a hemp oil. But these are things that are natural. They're organic. The body loves them.
So don't wait to get sick.
No, you don't have to wait. You don't have to anticipate you're going to get anything, because the inevitable will happen. The inevitable will happen. And it's all based upon what's happening with what the talking heads are saying. It'll happen based upon how you choose to live your life, how you choose to love, how you choose to empower your body with life force energy.
An old guy came up to me when we were photographing with big cameras in the Southwest in the 70s. And this guy came up with no teeth, and I had my dark cloth on, and I was photographing an old building like photographers do, a door with a great handle that was rusty. And he says, "Young man, the parts wear out."
Well, they don't have to.
But that's
life and death.
Yeah.
Life and death is a choice.
But we
Death
have
is,
we have to keep them lubricated by moving, and everybody's
yeah.
sitting by the freaking computer
Death,
now.
death is a symptom of acidity. That's all it is. If you can manage and maintain, in fact, that work was done by a scientist, Alex Carrel. I don't know if you heard of him. He received the Nobel Prize posthumously in 1964 for discovering how to keep organs alive indefinitely. He kept a chicken heart alive for 20 years.
Woo!
Now we know chickens don't live 20 years,
No.
let alone their hearts. But what he demonstrated is that there's the law of physics. There's organization and disorganization, which goes on in the human body and goes on in any organization on this planet, in the universe. And it's going on dependent upon the environment in which it lives. So if you can manage and maintain the environment, which is, I mean, this is all theoretical, but if you could, just like Dr. Carrel did, in maintaining the alkaline design, what was he doing? He was changing the fluids of the heart was bathed in every 72 hours into an alkaline saline solution. And that's today, even today, that's how organs are preserved. They're put within an environment that it can actually live. And if you can manage and maintain the internal environment, the inevitable will happen. The outcome of that will be extraordinary good health. You'll be thriving rather than dying.
I'm due for a gallbladder liver flush, and I'm a fan of hydrology, and so everybody stay healthy. Health is your wealth. That's a really beautiful thing. Use your one-liners, but get to it. Exercise, get outside like Dr. Young is teaching us and sharing with us. And it's so great having you today. We'll have you on again. And everybody, we've thrown up all the websites that we can have today for Dr. Young, and we're just blessed. And you know, stay away from your 5G. Turn your Wi-Fi off at night, everybody, and find the Love Center. And that's all I know. Thank you so much, Dr. Young.
Thank you, Jeff. Nice. Thanks for your invitation. Thanks for our discussion today, and you know, share this information. It's not only life-changing, it's life-saving.
Well, we're on IBM.tv. We thank Kimberly Calhoun and her team for allowing us to be on IBM.tv. We are actually going global, mister. And so it's really beautiful. They can see us in Russia and Spain and Portugal today, right now. And it'll be on the YouTube channel, and I'll let you have the link when I get it, and you can tell everybody to see the rewind.
Well, congratulations on your show here. You know, God bless you, Jeff. God bless America. God bless humanity. You know,
it's all in the angels. The angels got it. I mean, how are we together? How do our parents meet and make me? It's so cosmic, and it's important to remember. You know, in 2001, Stanley Kubrick, the last scene when he went into the colors, and the last scene he turned back into the embryo. So beautiful. So it's nice to walk this planet with you, Dr. Young, and I'm so glad you're here with us. Not on the inside, and that we're gonna have a lot more interest in my prisoners inside. But now that you're shedding the light on the bad food in there, I think maybe I may start something to get good food and good water into the prisons.
Well, that's a good start. Exercise every day, get sunlight every day. This is not, prisoners don't get that opportunity.
I know, but how do we? It's a beginning. I mean, I'm just saying is that if we can send this from our mouths to God's ears, you know, if we can send the angels into the prisons, that's what I. It's my passion is to deal with the prisoners. So,
well, if you have me back on, I'll tell you a few of the life-saving stories that happened.
All right. Okay.
While I was
We'll talk to you in June. Maybe
But
we'll
thank
have
you.
you back on.
Jeff.
Yeah, we love you so
All
much.
right.
And,
God bless. Take
thank you
care.
so much. Okay, thank you
All
so
right,
much.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody. 3, 2, 1, you know what to do. And this is Jeff Eichen signing out. Hemp, hemp, hooray.